Mexican repatriation was a mass deportation campaign during the Great Depression that disproportionately targeted individuals of Mexican descent, including legal American citizens. Amid economic instability, the U.S. government sought to reduce job competition by expelling Mexican nationals, often ignoring their citizenship status. Authorities employed coercive tactics such as threatening families with deportation, denying access to public services, conducting workplace raids, and spreading fear through highly visible community sweeps. An estimated 1 to 2 million people were deported, roughly of whom were U.S.-born citizens. This campaign represents one of the largest violations of civil liberties in U.S. history. Racial profiling and discriminatory policies were central to these deportations. Officials often assumed that individuals who appeared ethnically Mexican were immigrants, disregarding legal documentation or constitutional protections. Birth certificates were ignored, and raids indiscriminately targeted neighborhoods, workplaces, and public spaces. Families were forcibly separated, with U.S.-born children deported alongside their parents to a country they had never known. For example, Pedro Gonzalez, a U.S. citizen born in Los Angeles, was deported with his family and struggled to rebuild his life in Mexico, a place he had never visited before. Stories like his illustrate the emotional and social devastation these policies cause. Economic anxieties fueled this injustice, particularly in industries relying on Mexican labor. Politicians and local leaders capitalized on widespread unemployment and financial hardship, blaming immigrants for job shortages and wage stagnation. In agriculture and railroads, where Mexican labor was prominent, deportations created temporary wage increases for white workers, but they also disrupted productivity. Long-term economic consequences included labor shortages in key industries, such as farming, which relied heavily on the skills and experience of Mexican workers. Regions like California experienced declines in agricultural output, which were only mitigated years later through the Bracero program, a government initiative that brought Mexican workers back to the U.S. to fill labor gaps. For deported individuals, the loss of homes, jobs, and educational opportunities created cycles of poverty and economic instability that persisted for generations. The Mexican government's response to the influx of deportees was varied and strained. Many deportees, including U.S. citizens, faced significant challenges integrating into Mexican society. Some were placed in resettlement colonies with limited resources, while others were left to fend for themselves in unfamiliar environments. The Mexican government struggled to accommodate the sudden increase in population, as its own economy was already fragile during the global depression. Deportees often faced discrimination from native Mexicans, compounding their difficulties in building stable lives. This lack of adequate support further highlights the lasting harm caused by the repatriation campaign. Legal challenges were rare but significant in exposing systemic injustices. Victims of repatriation were routinely denied due process, with authorities bypassing constitutional protections by conducting raids without warrants and compelling compliance through fear tactics. Some families sought justice through lawsuits, like Del Rio ISD v. Salvatierra in 1930, which highlighted discrimination against Mexican Americans in education and public services. Though most cases failed to achieve immediate success, they laid the groundwork for later legal victories, such as Hernandez v. Texas, which expanded civil rights protections to Mexican Americans. These efforts underscored the systemic barriers to justice faced by those targeted by repatriation policies. The legacy of Mexican repatriation is a stark reminder of the dangers of scapegoating during economic downturns. The forced deportations deeply affected Mexican American identity, fostering resilience and a renewed determination to challenge discrimination. These events also serve as a historical parallel to contemporary issues surrounding immigration, border control, and racial profiling. The enduring vulnerability of minority groups to systemic injustice underscores the importance of remembering such episodes to inform modern civil rights discussions. By reflecting on the long-term economic and social costs, as well as the human suffering caused by these policies, we can better ensure that such injustices are not repeated in the future.